Joining me on Ethocast is a very interesting person. You might say he is the most interesting man in Greek life. He is Mike Ayalon. He is the CEO of Greek University. In the interest of full disclosure, I am one of the speakers for Greek University, so that makes it even more special for me to have Mike on. Mike, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show, episode number one. Let's go, Eddie.
Yeah, man, let's go. So, first things first, how did you get into fraternity life? What pulled you in?
Well, it's a story just like anything else. I chose the University of Buffalo because my best friend from high school, he was a year older than I was. His name was Scott. And he told me he was having a great time at the University of Buffalo. So I applied and I got in thinking that I would join him for my freshman year, his sophomore year. And I called him about a week before school started and he said, Mike, I have some bad news for you. I said, what happened? He said, well, I failed out of school. And I was like, what? I chose the University of Buffalo because you were going there. Now I know absolutely nobody on campus. And he was a big guy. He got a job as a security guard at night and he couldn't wake up for his morning classes. So he failed out.
Wow.
And when I got there, I tell you, my entire first semester, I was always doing one of three things. I was either eating, sleeping, or going to class. That was
Yeah.
it. And at the end of my first semester, I called up my dad and I said, Dad, I'm at this institution with 30,000 students. I'm just a number here. My professors, there's 500 kids in the lecture hall. They don't know if I'm in the lecture hall or not. They don't come knocking on my door and say, Hey, Mike, where were you today? That doesn't happen. So I said, I've given it a lot of thought and I've decided I'm going to drop out of school. And my dad, of course, starts yelling and cursing on the phone. And finally, he comes back to the phone and he says, No, he says, I don't think so. My son is going to be a college graduate. And I said, But Dad, you can't make me go back to Buffalo. And he said, Well, as a matter of fact, I've rented out your room back home. So you got no place to go. And so now I go back to Buffalo. Now it's January. It's the start of my spring semester because I have no other place to go. I'm sitting in calculus class and it's snowing. There's already 5 feet on the ground of snow and it's snowing on top of the 5 feet. And there's a kid
But wait, the way you started that part is January, and I'm back in Buffalo, and I'm like, ooh, man.
yeah, you know what that's like. And so,
Yes, I've seen it.
yeah, you've seen it. And so now, I'm looking at this 5 feet of snow and the snow that's coming on top of it. And I'm wondering why I didn't go to school in the South. That would have been a smarter decision. And, and finally I look over to my left because I'm just bored in class thinking, what am I doing here? And there's a kid sitting next to me. He's wearing cutoff jean shorts and flip flops to class. And we all have a fraternity brother, by the way, that's just like this. And I looked over, and he had Sigma Pi tattooed Greek letters on his thigh of his leg. And I looked over and I said, "Man, this must be the greatest organization on the planet because why else would you tattoo these Greek letters on your body and look at that every single day?" And so after class, I pulled him aside. I said, "Can you tell me what is this fraternity?" And he said, "Well, I can tell you about our history. I can tell you about our founders, but it's easier if you just come over to the house and meet the guys." So I
Mm.
looked at my calendar. Yeah, I got nothing going on today. And so I followed him back to the house. I met the guys, good group of guys. That was about it. And that was on a Tuesday. On Thursday, I went back to calculus class, sat next to the same kid. His name was Rich. And after class, he said, Mike, I'd love for you to come by the house again today. I said, let me check my calendar. Yep, nothing going on today either. And so I followed him to the house. This time, when I got to the house, they all greeted me. They said, Hey,
Wow.
Mike, it's great to see you again. Thanks for coming by. That's it. It was
Yeah.
beautiful. I had a family now. I had people who, number one, use my name. Remember that during recruitment because your name is your
Yeah.
favorite word in the English language. And then number two, they actually cared if I came to the house or not. They were going to miss me if I didn't show up. That was
Wow.
the family that I needed in order to be successful at the University of Buffalo. It goes back to love and belonging and Maslow's hierarchy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so all right, so Sigma Pi it is.
Yeah.
What was it about the values or the vibe of Sigma Pi that really vibed or matched who you are?
Yeah, I mean, in our creed, we talk about things like fellowship. We talk
Mhm.
about brotherhood. We talk about truth and justice. We talk about scholarship. We talk about chivalry. We talk about culture, developing character, and we talk
Mm.
about service. all of these ideas are not unique to Sigma Pi. They're also in Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. They're also in every fraternity on the planet. And so we all believe in the same things. And it really connected me to the ritual, to the brotherhood, that they all espouse these values. And then
Hmm.
today, I connect with them because this is exactly what I do with my life. When my kids ask me, well, Dad, why are you going out to talk about sexual assault prevention on a college campus? I actually go back to those values, and my kids, they know the creed of
Hmm.
Sigma Pi. This is why I do what I do every single day. When we talk about chivalry, it's not just something that we talk about in the creed of the fraternity, it's something that I actually do in action.
Hmm.
And that is how I want other college students to know fraternity and sorority members, is by actually living out their values, not just saying them. And I'm living them out every single day.
Isn't it funny how that happens, though? I mean, I have been wandering around for a long time trying to figure out, well, what do I really care about? What is the thing? What is Eddie's thing? And I'm having a conversation with my therapist one day, and she goes, you are such a values driven person. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I went right back to the reason I wanted to become a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, because I saw very strong values, and the values were all ingrained in being some type of leader, no matter where you are. Just try to be the leader in the moment as much as possible. That's what I picked up from being an alpha. And it was so funny how it took me so long to go right back to the reason that I was attracted to alpha and I wanted to become an alpha. And I'm like, it fits with my life. This is how I choose to live my life. So that's really interesting. And of course, you did something that no one in their right mind would do. You became an executive director of your fraternity.
I did. I did.
So what drew you to that? What made you step into that role?
Nobody in their right mind ever actually thinks about doing this job. Okay. Nobody does, believe me. And certainly, you have this imposter syndrome. I remember having dinner with
Mm.
one of the board members for the fraternity, and we were just talking about fraternity because that's what fraternity guys do. And I said something, and he just looked at me. He dropped his knife and fork on the plate, and he said, "You're going to be the next executive director of the national fraternity." And I said, "You've
Oh
got to be
yeah, he
kidding me.
got
I
you.
went to I went to SUNY Buffalo. I mean, seriously, like you must be joking, because there's got to be somebody else in our 115,000 members that's more qualified to do it than me." And it was his belief in me that made me believe that I could do it. And that's a lesson
Yeah.
to the undergraduates who are listening. You really have to make other people on your team believe that they can do it. And when you're a leader and they see
Mm.
you in that light, now suddenly you believe that you can attain it, something that would be unattainable for most people. And so
Hmm.
from that point on, they sent out the call for resumes. After that conversation, I submitted my resume, and sure enough, I was hired right away. And I did that for a little over 3 years.
Hmm.
And certainly it was the most rewarding experience that I think I've ever had in my career. It really was just a very formative position that really kind of led me on this track to build Greek University and to help not only my fraternity, but every fraternity and
Hmm.
sorority in the country.
Hmm. You're listening to Ethocast. I'm Eddie Francis, and we're talking to Mike Ayalon. He is the CEO of Greek University, and that's a good segue. So, now as the CEO of Greek University, your work shows that you still have this passion for Greek life. Why is it still there?
Yeah, I believe it's the best leadership experience on any college campus. I really believe that. And there are still issues that need to be resolved. By no means am I
Yeah.
saying that there are no problems. Of course, there are problems. I want to make it better. I want to make it safer. I want to continue to grow this fraternity and sorority experience so that our children and our grandchildren will have the
Yeah.
same great leadership opportunities that we were given. So, really, it's a way for me to pay it forward to the next generation of college students, that they're going to get those leadership skills and experiences around communication and motivation, and get all of that hands-on experience while they're still in college, to be very prepared for what's ahead after graduation.
you have a great TikTok presence, and you and one thing I've noticed in looking at your TikTok is you take some grief from people sometimes. They're just like, "Oh, you overgrown frat boy. Why you still care about frats?" And so, how do you handle that when folks start asking you why is it at your age, air quotes, you still care about fraternities and sororities?
I mean, we took an obligation when we joined our
Mhm.
fraternity at the altar, and we said that we were going to be a member for life. I've never
Yeah.
subscribed to this theory. And by the way, NPHC organizations do a much better job of lifetime membership than do, let's say, IFC organizations or Panhellenic organizations. And really, that's what I'm trying to build out. Is this is a lifetime experience that we
Mhm.
committed to. It's not just something we did past tense in college. It's something that we
Mhm.
do for life. These are values that we commit to for life. When I think about, the oath that we've taken, usually most people take like three oaths in their lives. The first one is usually around, coming of age. In Judaism, it's bar,
Mhm.
bat mitzvah, for example. So you take an oath there that essentially, for me as a bar mitzvah guy, you take an oath that all the sins that you make as at 12 years old now belong to you, not to your parents. So you're
Mm.
taking personal ownership of doing the right thing, and you say that commitment at your bar mitzvah. The next oath, of course, was to the fraternity or sorority. And then the last oath is the one that you take to your spouse, to my wife, that I'm going to love
Mhm.
her in sickness and in health forever. And so all of these oaths that I've taken, these are all oaths that I intend to do for the rest of my life. It's not just something that I do today or this week, it's something that I'm committed to. And so I
Mhm.
love those comments that come in on TikTok at Greek University, of course. I have a lot of fans on there. And yeah, there's always going to be haters. I think TikTok as a platform is always kind of aggressive, a little bit
Yeah.
sharper than, let's say, Instagram, for example. And that's
Yeah.
okay, it comes with the territory. But ultimately, I love those comments, positive, negative. I think they're all great, and they end up boosting all of my visibility. So I'm
Yeah.
actually thankful for both the positive and the negative comments.
Yeah. I remember that, when I was in college, I remember the first time um, I heard someone from one of the predominantly white organizations. I remember the first time I heard someone say, well, I was in a fraternity or sorority in college. And I remember talking to my frat brothers about it and some AKAs and some Deltas and friends of mine who were Omegas and Kappas. And we were just like, have you ever heard somebody say that they were in their fraternity? And we would sit
Mhm.
around and go, I mean, how does that even work? I mean, what do you mean you were in? No, no, you're always in. And so for us, I mean, from the time we are initiated, and even before we're initiated, I mean, a lot of us who get into the NPHC organizations, the way we get in is from some alumni member. A lot of times, who says you would be a great member of, and it's somebody who is a school teacher, it might even be a politician, a police officer, a business, an executive, or somebody like that. But it is someone, or our parents, but it is someone in our lives who is, they are in a leadership position and they have lived a long time and they can see it in us before we can see it in ourselves. So I do remember the first time I heard somebody say that they were in a fraternity or sorority, and I was just sitting there going, "Nah, come on, please, no, no, no." And it's really interesting the shift though that happens over the course of time. For some folks, the shift doesn't quite happen for some folks, but the shift over time in realizing what the values and the aims and the motto and the mission, all of that meant in your undergrad years, but then how it all shifts, like you mentioned earlier, how it all shifts to your life and how it all plays into your personal life now. For instance, being a husband, your dedication to being a husband. I joke with my wife sometimes. I was like, being married is like being online sometimes. So um, gotta watch your back, gotta watch your front. So so let's talk about the issues that you talk about, because you tackle some pretty heavy issues in Greek life. You tackle issues like sexual assault, hazing, alcohol, drug addiction, other types of addiction. Um, Based on what you have seen and what you have experienced, why is it that these are the issues that seem to bubble to the top a lot of times in Greek life?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that question because I'm actually writing my dissertation right now on the early warning signs of hazing
All
in
right.
college fraternities and
Let's hear it
sororities.
for the dissertation. All right, cool.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to be defending in February, which is really exciting. And I've already written 60 pages of my chapter 1 and 2 of the dissertation. And I really talk about this exact
Mm,
question. But first, I mean, let's talk about them in categories. Let's start with the alcohol piece.
mhm,
Alcohol use is so taboo in this country because we eliminated access to it until you're 21. If we just
mm,
moved it back to 18 like it was before, then we would actually save lives, and the statistics in Europe are an example that proves that. But it's very hard to go backwards now in the United
mm,
States, especially with all the political groups that we have in this country. So now, what we've done it to ourselves. What we've done is we've driven this culture of drinking underground. And that's when we start to see pre gaming behavior on college campuses, which is basically
mm,
where we're trying to get as intoxicated as we can in the shortest amount of time before we go out to the bars, because you have somebody who's 18 or 19 years old, they don't have access to alcohol in the bars. So they have to drive that underground. And when they do that and they're drinking a lot of alcohol, trying to get as intoxicated as possible, as quickly as possible, that formula leads people to the hospital, and sometimes
mm,
even kills people. So clearly, 18-year-olds in the United States are now going to experiment with alcohol at college because they haven't had access to it at their home with their
mm,
family before. So now it's like, hey, this is taboo, and I really want to try this. And that's where we get into trouble. Now, talking about, let's say, hazing, start talking about sexual assault. There are certain rites of passage that happens in every society. When we talk about hazing around transition, such as birth, puberty, conception, death. It certainly happens at college. It even happens in corporations as well. And all of these rites of passage reflect the social structures by which our society is organized. And the rites
mm,
of passage include three things: separation from your old group, margin, where the person symbolically has nothing, and then aggregation, where they're invited in, but they enter at the lowest rung. Right. So think about when you first got hired at a large corporation. This
yeah.
reinforces that hierarchy. It creates power relationships between all the participants. And in the case of a sexual assault, it's all about power over another human. That's why you
Mm,
frequently see sexual assaults happening among bosses and their subordinates, or coaches and their players, right? There's a power differential. Same thing is true with hazing, right? You have the fraternity brothers, and then you have the new members, or pledges, as they are called. So the whole point to hazing is that they believe that it increases group solidarity. The reality is the solidarity actually occurs mostly between the new members, not between the entire organization. And the participation in the hazing shows the new members' commitment to this new group. So when we talk about hazing, a 2019 study showed that students did it to feel more like a part of the group. They wanted a sense of accomplishment, they wanted to feel stronger. But there are also obviously a lot of negative outcomes associated with hazing, such as feeling stressed, trouble with academics, feeling humiliated, difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating in class, and feeling depressed. So you can see here that it's a complicated issue. It's not something that
yeah.
we can easily solve. Hazing is something that happens across all societies, all organizations, not just fraternities and sororities. You see it in the military, you see it in athletics, you see it in the
Mhm,
band. I mean, it's all over the place. And when we're talking about sexual assaults or hazing, a lot of it is because of that power differential, and it allows that person to have authority and power over somebody that's lesser.
mm. You're listening to Ethocast. I'm Eddie Francis, and we're talking to Mike Ayalon. He is the CEO of Greek University. I can only imagine. I haven't worked in marketing and communications at a university. One of the things I thought about often was I would be the one if an incident happened on campus. I would get a phone call, because I'm over PR, and then I would have to figure out how to work with people, how to word an email, how to do this. But then I would think to myself, man, if I'm getting this call right now and I get to go back to sleep, after I type a message out, well, what about the president and the student affairs people and the ones who have to stay up practically all night dealing with this kind of stuff? I would ask myself that question, or at least I learned to ask myself that question after a while. But then I would see times when I would wonder how much more an institution can do to curb some of the stuff happening, not just in Greek life, but in student life, student life overall. But since we're talking about Greek life, I'm wondering what can they do to curb some more of this stuff. I would hear some decisions that I'm sitting there going, "No, this is a really bad decision. It's going to make it even worse." But then there were times I was thinking, "Well, man, I don't know if there's anything they can do because these are people who are young adults. They are coming of age. They are transitioning from the teenage years into the young adult years, and they have all kinds of stuff happening in their brains all at one time because they are literally still growing." Um, from what you have experienced and from the conversations that you've had over the years and the work that you're doing in your dissertation, and I know this is kind of a rough question, but where do you see the responsibility of the college or the university ending and the responsibility of the fraternity of the sorority member beginning? Or if that even a reasonable question?
I think it's a reasonable question, but it's not an easy one to answer. It's so
Yeah.
controversial because it resides at the intersection of community needs on campus and our own individual liberties as students, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's a saying here, in loco parentis, which in Latin literally means in the place of the parent. And that views the institution, the college or university, as taking the role of the parent with regard to all student conduct. But that's not
Mm-hmm.
really applicable today. Then there's another theory, it's called contract theory, that basically says that students enter into a contract by signing their registration document at the university and paying fees. And this is the student accepting all of the conduct rules and regulations at the university.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that doesn't really hold much water today. Today, it's more about what's called educational purpose theory. And that says that there's a relationship between the students and the institution, the college or university. This is an educational relationship. And discipline only happens when it adversely impacts the institution's mission. So that
Mm-hmm.
is this is really the other realistic basis for student discipline. It's really the only one that's realistic that still holds water today. So to answer your question, the responsibility of the university is to their mission. Okay, so you just go and
Mm-hmm.
read the mission statement of the university. The responsibility of the student, or in this case, maybe a fraternity or sorority member, is really to their own learning, to their own values, and to their own success beyond graduation.
So the thing to me that, yeah, this is complicated. And I think what frustrates me sometimes is when I would hear administrators talk about this and there would be this notion that there was a simple answer. It's like, just do this, just do that, just put this policy in place, just do that. Well, if they do, but then the other part of it that's complicated to me, Mike, is I view a college campus as a small city. And so you have the president who's the mayor of this city. You have the administration. They help set the policy. So there's your city council and some of the other business operations people. But the students are citizens, and they are, and then the student groups, the academic units, they're all the neighborhoods of this city. And the question is, I mean, to me, if when I look at it as a city, it's not like the mayor of New Orleans can go out and just start disciplining all the people in the city. I mean, that's what you have a police force for. But even then, the waters can still be very murky about how you discipline people. And I used to hear these debates all the time in administrative meetings where there would be this high level conversation of the administration saying, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to implement this policy better, we need to do that better. And then, ironically, the people from student affairs would say, yeah, but these are adults and they do have responsibilities, and you can't just police them 24/7. At some point, somebody's going to have to get expelled and just learn a lesson. So it's, yeah, I can see, with all those, especially with all the different theories that you point out, I can see how this, this is a very complicated question, which is why it's a question in the first place, because it seemed like a very complicated question.
Yeah.
Are there times when you talk to administrators, are there times that you just kind of stop and go, okay, wait a minute, we really need to kind of revisit some things here so that you can understand who exactly is on your campus, who's in those residence halls, because I don't think you really understand who's in there. Has there ever been a time you felt that way speaking to an administrator?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I'm the executive director of the national fraternity, sometimes you get sideways with administrators because, there's two different, we have two different lenses. We're coming at it slightly
Yeah,
differently. I never want to, just like punish, have like punitive punishments against, a student. I don't believe in that. I think that we're all imperfect. I'm
yeah,
imperfect. I made a ton of bad decisions. I made a ton of mistakes as chapter president of my fraternity. I made mistakes as the executive director of the national fraternity. And I make mistakes as the CEO of Greek University, too. I'm not a
mhm,
perfect human. I make mistakes. I'm built just like everybody else. And so I think, we have to start thinking about, when we do have, these behavior issues that we need to address. The question is, can this be a learning experience for this student? And
yeah,
I think that's where sometimes, we might get sideways with administrators is that we're all here to learn. And yes, we are going to make mistakes at times, but we have to really think about the punishment that we're putting in place and make sure that this can be a learning experience for this particular student as opposed to just, off with their heads. And so
yeah,
I think that's really important to think about. And sometimes, when I see, like these system wide shutdowns, for example, where you have one or two organizations on campus, maybe one of them has a hazing violation, and then we shut down the entire system. I think we're sending the wrong message. We have to think about the punishment
mm,
and basically say, wait a minute, number one, is this really in line with the student code of conduct? Usually it's not. You can't really just, system wide shut down an entire system when you maybe have one student or one organization that's found responsible for, let's say, hazing behavior, for example. But also, we have to think about what is the implication of that. We want students to come forward and report hazing in their system if they see it in another fraternity or another sorority. But if they see a system wide shutdown, what does that tell them? That tells them that we're not going to report anything in the future because it's going to impact us whether we did it or not.
yeah,
So it doesn't
yeah.
work. It's actually exactly opposed to the results that we want. We want students to report it so that way we can save them before somebody gets hurt.
And the thing that often look at is I often look at who in Greek life who's actually doing an excellent job. The students who are really living up to the values of their fraternities and sororities. When is somebody going to tell them good job? Sometimes I wonder that, and sometimes I'm sitting there going, man, there's some students here who are doing excellent work. They have so many community service hours. They are great students. They have high GPAs. Their peers around campus trust them, and they see a lot of value in what they do. Yet they're the ones who are getting thrown into this punishment, and I can only imagine how unfair that feels to them and how frustrating it is to them. So I want to end with a big Mike solution here. So what is your big message to fraternity or sorority members today so that they can be the best leaders that they can be, not only on their campuses, not only in their chapters, but beyond? What's your big message to them?
The big message actually has six components to it because it's that big. Message number one, component number one is you need regular education and training as students, as leaders in your fraternity or sorority. So that means that you need to attend your national organization leadership conferences, conventions, and then also at the university, because not everyone gets to go to that. At the university, you need all students to attend regular speakers and educational programming both from inside the institution, and there are many people that are qualified to do that kind of work at your campus, as well as outside of the institution to hire speakers from outside of the institution that can share best practices from universities all over the nation, because the problems that you're having are not unique to your own campus. I got news for you. So, number two is you need mentors. I'm finding that a lot of students really rely on each other students, for advice. And there are plenty of mentors out there that are more than willing to help you. Just use LinkedIn. And as a college student, more than likely, that alumnus in your field or in your fraternity or sorority or what have you, or the company you want to work for, they will probably allow a meeting between the two of you if you ask. It might not be today, it might be in 2 weeks because they're busy, but
Mhm.
understand they will probably talk to you because you have nothing to sell them. You're a college student and you just want to learn more. So, number two is get mentors. Number three, I want you to do community service and philanthropy. Do you know that there are 2 billion people in this world, or 26% of the total world population, that lack safe drinking water? We are
Mm.
very fortunate in life. We, as fraternity and sorority members, have an obligation to give back and help others in our community. That is our obligation when we joined our organization. Number four, DEI initiatives. We need to create a more inclusive environment in fraternity and sorority life and ensure that all of our members feel valued and feel understood. And going with that, we need to recruit a diverse membership. Diverse organizations can solve problems faster and much better than organizations that don't have diverse members. So it actually works to your advantage to have diverse organizations, and those DEI initiatives will allow you to do that. Number five, I want you to do self reflection and self assessment open often, and be open to constructive criticism. That is the only way that we can get better as humans, is to be open to that constructive criticism and do self reflection on a regular basis. What's going well? What's not going so well? What do I need to work on? And then finally, I want you to set goals for yourself and your organization and be accountable to those goals. We don't talk about goals enough within our organization. It's really important that you have those short-term goals and the long-term goals that you want to see in 6 months, a year. And I want you to be accountable to those things. So that means reviewing them on a regular basis to make sure that we're still on track. Those are the big message to fraternity and sorority members today, so they can be the best leaders they can be.
Mike Ayalon, he is the CEO of Greek University. He's also an author, by the way. He cranks out a book. You know what? He just cranked a book out. There's a new book. It just happened. He's an author, and of
Another
course, he
spot.
is a speaker. Mike, thank you so much for joining me on Ethocast, man.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Eddie.
Ethocast is a 4-hour edification limited series. If you like what you heard, like and follow this podcast for more leadership insights for your fraternity or sorority chapter. To find out how you can bring followership to leadership or the Black Greek Success Program to your campus or a campus near you, email today, eddie@eddiefrancis.com. Until next time, spread brotherly and sisterly love wherever you go.